Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Implant Practices podcast. I'm your host, Philip Gordon, and today I've got Horst Beyer with iMetric 4D Imaging. Horst, thanks for being on the show today.
My pleasure, Philip.
Now, you are involved with the iMetric 4D company, which is a imaging system for implants. It's an extraoral imaging device. Why don't you give me a little information about what position you hold with the company and some of your background as far as getting into the dental field and how this company and product came to be, so that people have a little bit of kind of understanding of kind of what's gone behind the scenes and where you're at.
Yeah. It may be interesting to see where we are actually coming from, because it's very different from dental. I have a PhD in photogrammetry, and I basically started research in this area, making measurements with digital cameras in '85, when something like 384 by 5 pixel cameras were a revolution. And in '93, I made my PhD and basically started the company as consultant, and we started to develop the first systems. At that time, we were basically working for automotive, aerospace, nuclear, and this kind of applications where, we measure small objects like in jewelry, or we measure complete airplanes. Very, very different to dental. The dental market only started in about 2006, when we started to work for a company that was making bars. And that's also how we specialized basically in this area. So from 2006, we started in the dental industry, basically because of a lab that purchased a scanner from us. And so we learned a lot about how this industry works and how accurate you have to be. And since about 2010, we're working with all the large milling centers, and one of our reputations is that basically was one of the largest milling centers worldwide since 2010. The lab scanner that they use from us has never been the reason for failure of a large structure. And even today, people like Dentsply, Glidewell, Modern Dental, Burbank Dental, they all use our lab scanners for large implant structures. And very early on, we had discussions actually, so why do we have to be so precise when in the beginning we already have all these errors? When we take an impression, when we pour a model, and then when we scan, we have 3 times errors. And basically, once we're at the model, we have almost lost the war. And so we discussed and thought about how can we do this better. And we worked quite a long time to get a solution where we can measure implant positions in the mouth. And I think since about 6 months, we are now really happy with the level where we're at. We can basically measure in the mouth almost more precise than most lab scanners can do the model.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's amazing. It's, I think obviously the limitations is, taking something out of the mouth, reproducing it on a model, then having something made on the model that fits the mouth. I mean, you're exactly right in the fact that, early on in dentistry and even up until lately, it's been like, okay, we have to build in these imprecise measures because we know it's not perfect, right? So like impression material has a certain type of warpage. Stone has a percentage of warpage. When we're making dies, we have spacers for die spacers for imprecise fits. We have other things to account for imprecision, right? And that's just how dentistry has evolved. Where we're getting now is in the digital world, how can we get away from that certain amount of impreciseness and get right down to the exact fit? Because in the tooth world, the imprecise fit can work. In the implant world, that game doesn't apply, right? And so it's very interesting now that we have different technologies for different industries. Those are crossing over into the implant world and saying, we have to have something that fits perfectly on the model and fits perfectly in the mouth. And I think that's what's led to the evolution of bringing this technology to the dental world. And so let's kind of talk about that technology a bit and what that means. So what exactly is, so the iCam 4D, what type of technology is it and how does it work? Because I think most people are familiar with intraoral imaging, and that's different than extraoral imaging.
Yeah, well, photogrammetry is a very, very different technology. We don't scan. There are many different technologies for scanning, and scanning is very good and very nice. But with photogrammetry, you just basically measure 3D coordinates of targets. And the nice advantage of photogrammetry for implantology in the mouse is if you imagine that you can measure 3 targets on a rigid object, yeah, these are like 3 spheres, and you have a scan body with 3 targets on it, you can already find its spatial position and orientation. And this is fabulous if you imagine you have a scan body all the way in the back, and with photogrammetry, you only have to catch it basic from one side with 2 cameras, and you already have the 3D coordinates. And that makes it, especially for this application, very, very powerful. If you use scanning technology, you really have to scan all the way around the scan body, and that is very, very difficult in the mouse. And then if you want to go in the mouse, then you always have a very small scanning volume, and over a full arch, you get tremendous errors, yeah. We see this typically, we see upper arch several tenths of a millimeter, of the lower arch, we see half a millimeter difference to intraoral scanners. Now, you have a second problem in the mouse, that if you open the mouse too strong, you have severe deformations on the lower jaw. And this is also something you can get around with photogrammetry. You don't need to open the mouse very far. And this is really also very, very good. So on the lower jaw, you can try to get rest position or to open it just a little bit and do the measurements. And so you can really get 3D data to high accuracy from outside the mouse, but chair side. And this is really where the big change is. I think the big change today is that traditionally in dental, you have been used that, everything is operator dependent and all this stuff. And with this, we can basically bring a metrology approach, a measurement approach to this discipline. And I think, as you said before, especially on implants, on multi-implant structures, we should be much more precise than traditionally. Because even if you look at the design, if you speak with people who make design of implants and things that go in it, we should be, within 10 micron, and in height, they speak of a few microns. And today, we're not even close to this. So I think we can improve the results tremendously. But of course, that will also take a long time until we have clinical literature about all that stuff. But it's obvious if you can get much better, faster, and less expensive, it's usually something that can get adopted relatively easily.
Yeah, if you can take any product and make it faster, cheaper, and easier, it's going to be well received. That's just, the realities of any world we work in. Can we make it faster for everybody, on both sides, the doctor, the patient? Can we make it cheaper for both sides, the doctor, the patient? Can we make it better, right, for the doctor and the patient? And I think, obviously you can't always do all 3 at once, but if you can strive for at least 2 of the 3, or to some degree all 3, you're going to have a winning scenario. So tell me how the product works. It's extraoral scanner. So it obviously there's let's just say let's just talk about full arch implantology, since I think that's kind of what it's really designed for. Not single units as much, but let's say someone's got a full mouth of implants, like 6 on the bottom or 6 on the top, or 4, whatever. There's usually 2 ways that people attach. Some people go direct to implant fixture. Most people do like a multi-unit abutment now. So I assume there's a way to attach something to a multi-unit abutment, and then these devices are then scanned from this camera, and the identification location of those is picked up and transferred somehow into a file base, whether an STL of sorts, and that can be merged into other exocad type software and process. So kind of walk me through the exact measures of that.
Yeah, you already got pretty much the process. So basically, let's assume you have a multi-unit abutment. What we do is we have a special type of scan body. On the bottom, on the interface side, it's a titanium. And then we have higher up sort of targets. So it looks like a domino, yeah? And you screw this tightly, and that's also very important. You just screw it very tightly, like finger tight, onto the multi-unit abutment. So you don't damage the multi-unit abutment, and you don't damage the scan body, yeah? And once you have all of those in, you take the camera, we call this iCam 4D, and you're like 25 centimeters, like 10 inches away from the mouse, and you start to take pictures from one side, and you just move around. And the way the software is written is that basically we detect where you are. So the first time we see these scan bodies, we can calculate where the camera is. And when we see that you have moved enough, we take the next shot, the next shot, and the next shot. And we calculate in real time which of the scan bodies you have and which of the scan bodies you have measured accurate enough. And the technology works starting 2 or more of implants. Yeah, we have people who even use it, for example, they have teeth in the front and they have some implants on the left and the right. It works there. It works on a full jaw. We have people who do all on 4. We have people who do 10 implants. All this works. Even if you have conflicts, for example, you have 2 implants close to each other, where you cannot put both of these iCam bodies on it at the same time, you can put one, do the measurements, and then take this one out and put one on the other implant and take again measurements, and we will automatically integrate all this without any loss of accuracy or precision. But that only gives you now implant positions. And now comes the second part. Now we have to relate these implant positions to the gingiva. And later on, of course, you need occlusion and all these things. So what we do is we take out these iCam bodies and we basically put on something like healing caps or even use healing caps. And then we take either an impression or after surgery, typically a simple impression. And using these healing caps, we can relate our measurements, the precise measurements, to the gingiva. And at the end of the day, what we have is we have accurate implant positions in relation to a gingiva, which is, of course, less accurate, but you don't need the gingiva to microns, yeah? And the occlusion, this is usually done with several approaches, more traditionally also with impressions, or if you have already a temporary, you can use the temporary to get occlusion and to get the whole relationship, yeah? So basically, all we do is we integrate very accurate implant positions into the other data set. Yeah, and the nice thing about it is we have a precision of a few micron and accuracy about 10 micron in the mouse, and it's absolutely user independent. We have done tests where people basically had this machine the first time in the hand, and they get precision of a few microns the first time, and that's the important thing. We don't have any user dependence, yeah? So whoever uses this measuring machine will get exactly the same results, and that's one of the big breakthroughs, I think, for iCam 4D, because, you know, it doesn't matter if you're tired or if somebody else does the measurements or if you're not trained, you always get the same results. And that's, I think, something that a lot of you people will probably have to get used to first, because so far you're used to user dependency and that you need a lot of training to take a good impression.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, obviously these full arch impressions can be very complicated. There's splints and jigs and luting together and sectioning and, custom impression trays and different types of impression materials, and all to make sure that we get a master cast with passivity, whatever that means, to degree of, and we're still using, creating analogs out of the mouth that were made from something that inherently has inaccuracy. So, if you're saying any assistant, regardless of their skill level and or doctor, can pick it up and shoot within under 10 microns of accuracy, that's a huge deal. And then if that can be incorporated into the operational flow, just like anything else that we're already doing, whether you're doing, all analog or a combination of analog and digital, then that's a huge benefit, because you can just take that implant position and throw it in your design studio software and keep things going. And I think that's what people wanted to say is that, or to know is that, this isn't, you don't have to have a whole new system. This just drops into the systems and workflows that are already in place. And it's not a specialized training that needs to come with it. It's something that relatively any user can have the experience needed, so that anybody can use it and it can drop in any workflow and it can make things, better for everybody.
We are quite amazed, actually, how easy it is to use on the clinical side. I mean, we have now clients who basically, we ship it, we send them some instructions, and do everything on their own. And it really fits into the current workflow. There's not a big change there. Of course, if you want, you can change your whole production workflow. So we have clients today, basically within 2 hours, they have a perfectly fitting temporary in the mouse. They take the measurements, they do a design in exocut or in 3Shape, and it doesn't matter for us. We're compatible with both. You even get the output for both CAD packages. They print something and they put in the mouse. Yeah. And the printing, they can print 15, 30 minutes. They harden it. It takes an hour. So 2 hours after taking the implant impressions, you have something in the mouse, and you don't have to worry about the fit anymore. This is the thing that is quite often we find it's very hard for dentists to imagine that all of a sudden the fit is perfect. That's like, it's really funny to see that. And then the other thing that's very funny to see is people who have this device for 2 or 3 months, they're not thinking about going back anymore. Yeah, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's because it's kind of like giving somebody an electric car. I mean, at first it's like you don't understand. There's no gas engine, and that's hard to kind of wrap your brain around until you've driven one. And then if you like it enough, it's like these smartphones. I mean, you're never going to go back to just a digital phone if you have a smartphone, right? You're going to always want a smartphone. So it's just kind of the evolution of it, right? You just don't want to go backwards with technology. You want to go forward. So I think that's where it's at. Obviously, it's got to make sense economically. It's got to make sense from the workflow standpoint. It's got to be user friendly. But once it checks all those boxes, it's like you don't want to go backwards. Where are you seeing this device used the most? What type of implant clinics or doctors are using this now? Where do you see this benefiting the implant field moving forward? And kind of where are things at now and looking over the next couple of years? Well,
we're quite amazed about what's actually happening in the market. We assumed that it will only be bought by people who do a lot of implants. And we see actually two things. So we have clinics, they do several patients a day. And there, of course, it's a money maker for them because it saves them so much time. I mean, here the implant impression is, let's say 15 seconds or a minute of measurement times, putting the scan bodies in there and taking them out, it's minutes, yeah? And it's relatively easy. Of course, when you insert the scan bodies, this is the only thing that you really have to be still careful. You have to make sure there is no gingiva between the scan body and the multi-unit abutment and this kind of stuff. So these clinics who do a lot is a no-brainer. But the other thing that we find very interesting is that actually clinics who do few cases a month, they bought it, and they basically say, I want peace of mind, because if I don't do a lot of impressions on implants, and you just said before, it's really, really difficult to do this right, with this device, they don't have to worry. Yeah, and so they say, this is for me sort of the insurance policy, or that I even can go and do more All-on-4s. And in the States, you have a completely different situation than, for example, here in Middle Europe. In Middle Europe, an All-on-4 is something very rare. In the States, I think you have between 40 and 60 million prospective patients that should actually get something like this. So the market is very, very different. And I think what it will do, it will change the whole way people do this, because all of a sudden everybody can do it. We can do it very rapidly, and so we can produce something that is of much, much higher quality without raising the cost. Yeah, I think if you just look at the time saving of the dentist in this case, it's so huge that this is phenomenal for economically for what is happening there.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no doubt with the age of the baby boomer population, with the necessity of treatment in this country, and with the affordability of treatment coming down, that these cases were going to continue to exponentially expand in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, that's just not a question. It's just a reality. Now, how these cases are managed and restored it is the question, right? The need is there. How it's going to be done and delivered is the question. And so the field's going to be open for this type of technology. It's just about who and how and when they embrace it. And so let's say, doctors or clinics were wanting to look at this device and, as far as sales and training and et cetera, I know you're in Switzerland right now is where I'm calling you at. And we'd had a brief discussion, but tell me about distribution and sales right now, as far as if someone or a group's listening say, well, I'm very interested, I would like to learn more. I know you said you're going to be launching a new website. What's the sales and distribution and training look like for the United States clients?
Yeah. So currently we do have an employee in the States who's doing all the training installations in the States. He's not doing the commercial part. And that's why we have this phone conversation and not him. And we're currently starting with several partners in the States, and they will provide either just the device and the training, or they will do, for example, training sessions where you can go and see the whole workflow, which is, I think, very interesting because it's something people are typically not familiar. And it even goes so far that we have people who will supply the iCam 4D with the complete production workflow. So you can get the iCam 4D, you can get the printer, you can get the milling machine, you can get the material, you can get the drill bits. And for the time being, I would say you just go on the website, you shoot us an email, and then depending on your needs, we can put you in touch with these people who are just starting up. And I think until the worst wave of the coronavirus is through, we will have several partners who will offer different support options, different product options in there, integrated with intraoral scanners, different types of intraoral scanners with different printers, with different milling machines.
Yeah, because, I can speak for myself. I just went kind of full digital laboratory this last year where, I brought in a full lab technician. We have a laboratory mill. We have 3D printers. We have intraoral scanners. We have desktop scanners. We have, basically everything there is except for this, right? And I think that would, for someone like me, this would make sense because I can drop it right in. We can take, the scan with the iCam 4D. We can integrate it into ExoCAD. We can print our models. We can mill our arches, and it works great. So my needs might be different than somebody else's who might be just taking impressions only. But you're right now hooking them up with various partners that you have with varying degrees of need and support. So, that's good because everybody's clinic and situation is at a different part, right? They might do some of this in-house. They might do some of this out-of-house. They might do none of it in-house. They might do all of it in-house. And I think being open to that is, the best way to serve your clients. And it sounds like you're creating relationships with different partners in the United States to make sure that happens.
Yeah, we also have quite a few partners. So it's kind of interesting. Initially, it was basically clinics. They bought it. And since I would say 6 to 9 months, we have laboratories who buy it. And they go out and they provide you the service work. So they would come with an iCam 4D in the clinic. They would do the measurements and they would do everything else. Yeah, because as you said, not every clinic wants to do everything on its own. You probably know the investment in time, effort, and finances to set up all the production in-house. It's not something that's too simple. It takes a lot of know-how. You need to find the right people, et cetera, et cetera. So there are lots, just as you said, there are lots of different solutions. And I think there's a solution for everybody. You can get everything done out-house where somebody comes inside. You can do part of the fabrication in-house. For example, people, they have the iCam, they have an intraoral scanner, they send everything out to somebody else who does all the modeling, they do even the cam, and they just print or mill in the facility. And we have people who do everything in-house. And all these things are covered, and all these things we want to support directly or through our partners. And that's I think, that will help a lot in the industry to move forward.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think so too, because it's a rapidly changing field in the digital world. And I expect that to always be the case. I mean, technology changes rapidly, and you should expect your tools and equipment to do so too nowadays. Hopefully, the hardware stays the same, and the technology is what upgrades. So, if people go to imetric 4D.com, iMetric 4D.com, that's your website. You said that's going to be upgraded relatively soon. I assume there'll be a lot of information coming out. Let's say someone hit the contact us button, filled out the form. Obviously, you or someone else will be getting back with them, getting them the varying degrees of support and or suppliers they need. If they wanted to get going on this and they said, I'm ready to buy now and here's my credit card, I assume they could have this product in a number. I mean, once the Corona thing settles down, I imagine a couple weeks or a month, they could have this in and going and operational and rocking and rolling, right? I mean, this is kind of plug and play. And
the installation is really easy. I mean, the training is 15 minutes or so. You have to learn how to put the scan bodies and how to hold the camera. That's very easy. We're currently a little bit long on the shipping times, but the shipping times will get shorter very, very soon, because currently we're bringing out a new model and everybody who has ordered is getting the new model. So that will be start shipping end of May. And thereafter, within a few weeks, you will be able to get it. And you just mentioned credit card, and the credit card is one of the issues why we need partners in the US. It's very difficult from Europe to take credit cards. We have a completely different banking system over here. Well, I do wire transfers over my iPhone, and you do checks and credit cards. And doing a wire transfer in the States is something where you sometimes have to go to a bank. So that's very different. We will be setting up a US company also to make things even for our partners easier, but that will be 6 months to a year time frame. And also with financing, if you do financing in the States, it's much easier to do this through one of our US partners than directly with us, because we are foreign companies, and US financing companies don't enjoy working with foreign companies for understandable reasons. The same, it would be difficult in Switzerland to have a US financing. These are just financial, practical reasons. But that's where we're heading, and I think one of the important things is in this industry, there's so lot new things out there and so lot of things to learn that I think the whole training and support is a very, very important aspect. And that's what we are working very hard on, to get partners who can provide information, even before you buy something, that you can go and see it, do seminars, do in-house seminars where you can see the workflow, because I think the important thing is to see it. Once you see it, it's easy to understand. And that will be much simpler than going to, I don't know how many clinics and doing demonstrations. It's much, much better. And you can discuss to partners. We have people who are using this since a long time. You can talk to them. We have quite a few facilities now where you can go and test it yourself and work on real cases. I think that's very important to understand new technology and to get the training on new technology.
Absolutely. I kind of like to see something tangible before I, obviously make a big purchase. And I think most people do, and they want to understand the ins and outs of it. Now, you said there's a new model coming out at the end of May. Is this kind of a more ergonomically or more adapted? I assume the technology is just as good, but kind of generation 2 of this, and what do we expect from that, and anything else that relates to that?
Well, it's actually already generation 3. Once we bring out something, we're usually working on the next one. That's what we have to do in order to stay on the top. And also we learn all the time more. So the big difference to the generation 3 is basically will be smaller, it will be lighter, more ergonomic, and you only have USB and the power cable, which is a lot less than today. So it will be easier to connect, and it will be basically a lot easier to work with than today. Biggest change will be software. We're working also on easier software, where the workflow will be even less clicks. We basically want to get away from any user interaction that you say, okay, we want to do this case, we're ready to do the case, let's start. Because the workflow currently is that you pick up the iCam 4D, you calibrate it quick, with this, we're 100% sure that it's always okay. And then you go to the patient and do the measurements. And currently you have to say, yes, it's okay, or it's not okay, and whatever. And that we used initially because we were not sure how easy it works and how good it works. And today we see that we can automate everything. Basically, you pick up the camera, you do your measurements, and we realize when you stop the measurements, we save everything. So without too many clicks, we can go through the whole workflow. So this will also be ready with the new machine. And of course, we will also have the new software on all the older machines, and we'll try to have an upgrade program for all the people who have already generation and Gen 1 and 2 machines to Generation 3 machine. So just usual technological development. We get smaller, lighter, and better. Price is the same. We're not changing prices. We're not getting more expensive. There's no point in that.
Yeah. No, exactly. Technology is one of the few things where it should get better, smaller, and cheaper at the same time, hopefully. I mean, that's not always the case, but at least, that's the goal anyway, right? Like VCRs and DVD players and TVs. I guess TVs go the other way. We want them bigger. But, hopefully the technology increase brings down the price, ideally. So is there any last bit of knowledge we haven't covered about the product or company? Obviously, people can reach out to you as far as pricing, availability, and distribution. Anything else you would want an implant dentist to know about the product itself, or anything else with related to this moving forward?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, I think the device offers all the things that we originally wanted to do. We wanted to be able to measure in a passive situation. We want to be user independent, and we wanted to be much, much more precise than today. And this at basically a cost factor which is very, very low. I mean, there's only one replaceable part, which are the scan bodies, which you have to place over time. But the cost per use is something like $8. So for an all-in-4, it's still nothing compared to the time savings or the cost savings, because you don't need impression, you don't need to make models. So I think that the cost factor, everything is perfect today. And that's why I think it will get adopted very well in the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is the way it's going. So it's kind of like become an early user or a late user, but I think at some point you're going to be a user. I think, I will post the links for your website. It's iMetric4D.com, and get all the information on there for people to reach out. Look forward to hopefully seeing you in the States one day when all the travel bans are lifted again at a meeting and catching up face to face, and look forward to working with your group moving forward. So appreciate your time. I know everyone's got various things going on in their life with the coronavirus and such. So hoping you and everyone over there in Switzerland safe healing moving forward, and really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. I also hope that you stay safe, and there will be quite a lot of new things on the Facebook page quite soon, because I think it's a good time that people might actually have time to watch things. So we put videos on there, we put more information on there, and just feel free to contact us if anybody wants to know more. We're willing to help and try to educate people on this new technology.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you.